Välkomna till Mera 25s podcast. Här pratar vi om det svenska samhället, Europa, vår politiska samtid och vad som krävs för att göra framtiden ljusare. Jag heter Mark och idag har jag med mig Mo från BDS Sverige. Varmt välkommen Mo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mo, or Mohammad Ghannam, full name, and I'm working with BDS Sweden. Pleasure to be on your podcast.
Great to have you here. So I'm thinking we can just dive into it. What is BDS?
Okay, so BDS is a global Palestinian-led movement for the boycott, divestment, sanction of Israel. It was launched in 2005. It was launched by a call, what's called the BDS call, that was signed by and launched by the vast majority or the overwhelming majority of Palestinian civil society organizations, trade unions, political organizations, so on, from all sections of Palestinian society, both within Palestine and in exile as well. It calls for three things: ending occupation of all Arab lands, ending apartheid, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees and reparations. And it calls for these three goals and asks for solidarity from all free and conscientious people around the world, from civil society organizations around the world, through the tactics of boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. It is, of course, inspired by a long and deeply rooted history of Palestinian civil disobedience and nonviolent resistance, as well as the civil rights movement in the US and, of course, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. The movement, in short, advocates for ending complicity, both state, corporate, and institutional complicity in Israel's regime of oppression, apartheid, and occupation. It advocates for nonviolent, peaceful resistance and pressuring our governments and our corporations and our institutions to end this complicity.
That answered many of my questions, but I'll try and follow up a little bit. I'm interested to hear more about Palestinian civil society, because what we hear a lot in Western media, it basically is either the Palestinian Authority or we're talking about Hamas as actual organizations. When BDS was launched in 2005, can you describe a little bit like the lead up that led to this? As you mentioned, draw inspiration from both the civil rights movement and the move to end apartheid South Africa. So how do these organizations play out?
So we can even go way back a little bit in time, and we can track in the history of the Palestinian resistance and solidarity with Palestine. There have been many attempts to mainstream boycott as a weapon, both because of the learnings from other justice struggles and also because it's one of the most useful tactics for individuals to employ to end their own complicity. And also because of the ethical considerations. None of us really want to be complicit with our money or our effort in oppression. So there have been many attempts to do this, and there even have been organized attempts for academic and cultural boycotts of Israel, going all the way back to 2002, or probably even before. I just might not have the depth of the experience for then. But my first recognition of an actual call for an academic boycott of Israel came in 2002 with a letter in the UK press by the Rose couple. They were both academics, and it was signed by, I think, over 500 other academics, calling for an academic boycott of Israel, a complete and total boycott of Israel. This was one of the instances of a very early, principled call for a boycott. Of course, that developed later into what came out of also academic and cultural institutions in Palestine with the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, or what we call PACBI, PACBI. And that campaign is a founding member of BDS. So when BDS was launched in 2005, PACBI had already launched in 2004, calling for the academic and cultural boycott. BDS then came and was a bigger coalition of Palestinian civil society calling for all kinds of boycott and specifying more and developing more and more the strategy of this boycott. So, for example, one of the main differences between the Palestinian-led BDS movement and the BDS movement for South African or for anti-apartheid in South Africa is that the Palestinian BDS movement targets complicity, institutional complicity only, and not individual. Individual complicity also, of course, in some forms, but mainly it is an institutional boycott. The BDS movement for anti-apartheid in South Africa was boycotting everything and everyone South African. A sports person, if you were an academic or a cultural worker who's South African, the call was to boycott you from all avenues. For the Palestinian BDS movement, it is an institutional boycott, and it is very much tied to complicity and not ethnicity. So what we say, it's a boycott based on complicity, not identity. So it doesn't really matter if you are Israeli or if you are I don't know, Egyptian. What matters is your level of complicity and whether or not you're rejecting or refusing to be complicit in Israel's oppression. So let's say an artist who is an Israeli artist and is sponsored by the Ministry of Culture or is sponsored by a lobby group and they have an event in Malmo or in Stockholm, this is an event that we call for boycotting. It is an institutional tie with an institutional organization in Israel. But if it's just an individual who doesn't have an institutional ties, who doesn't endorse the oppression of Palestinians, who doesn't, for example, call for the genocide of Palestinians, so he doesn't have individual complicity in those sense of what we call a common sense boycott, then we don't call for boycotting them. We're only interested in boycotting and cutting the institutional ties because that is the strategic way to go. It is what actually allows Israel to continue its oppression and sustains its system of oppression is the institutional ties. And we've seen it so far. I know maybe I'm jumping ahead to something you want to explore, but we've seen it a lot with the calls to end trade agreement in Europe, for example, or ending academic institutional ties and not individual academic ties all over Europe and all over North America.
And I just wanted to add that if you look on an individual level, it seems like the people are massively in support of, first of all, ending the genocide. That's a no-brainer. But people are coming around to definitely complete Palestinian liberation. At least that's what I see on the streets and with people I talk about, even if they're not that politically active. For example, we might have Gothenburg University or Chalmers. They might have collaborations with an Israeli university. That's a pretty clear-cut example where you need to cut the academic ties. But then what about specific individuals in Israeli society? Maybe like bosättarledare, the leader of some colonizer community. Are there any direct actions against specific individuals, or is this mostly just focusing on simply on the institutional level on both, like the ones that, let's say in Sweden, have ties with Israeli institutions and focus on Israeli institutions, if that makes sense?
Right. The last part, I think maybe we can elaborate on this a little bit later. I got confused a little bit with the last part, but the first part, at least, the main criteria or the main target of boycotts, academic boycotts, is institutional ties. So let's say a research program, an exchange program. And by the way, there is on the BDS website and also on our own bdsveria.com website, there is more information about what are the specific projects The most detailed ones are, of course, on the bdsmovement.net website. And you will see examples and clear criteria for which projects that we call for boycotting. As an example, exchange programs, research programs, review programs, and so on, and funding, and not only with Israeli institutions, but also with complicit corporations. Overall, it is an institutional boycott, but we do recognize that there is a need for common sense boycotts within academia and within culture. Because, for example, you get people who are, let's say, Arnon Sofer, for example, who is an Israeli academic. He's also the head of a department. He's a blatant, unapologetic, racist, genocidal maniac. And he calls for, he has crazy sayings about Gaza and about Palestinians. And he once said, "We must kill and kill and kill." The only thing that worries me, this is still him, the only thing that worries me is that the Jewish boys and girls who will go and do the killing, when they come back, will they be able to be good mothers, good fathers, and good husbands and good sons? That's the only thing that worries him. And he calls Gazans animals, of course, even before the genocide. So this is an individual, for example, if he's coming in his individual capacity to Chalmers or to Gothenburg, just normal people knowing that he is that type of person, it is absolutely understandable that people would then want to call for a boycott of that event or that lecture and so on. And it's absolutely justified, and it is something that we call for and we recognize as well. In general, the most effect that you can do is working to eliminate the institutional ties, because they carry with them a lot of weight. They carry with them a lot of um, uh, material gain for Israeli universities. I don't know if the time will allow or not to go into the deep complicity of Israeli academia, but there's been many books written about this. Towers of Ivory and Steel, for example, is one that goes into deep detail about this topic. But Israeli universities are not just complicit with developing weapons, they also develop strategies, they develop entire doctrines for the Israeli military, like the Dahya doctrine, and they develop, it's kind of known in international law. I wish Adam was here then to kind of talk to him about this, but it's kind of known within international law that Israel continuously pushes and breaks the limits of international law to the point that it's quite meaningless. And this also kind of ties back to what you were saying about how people are a little bit looking at boycotts and divestment and sanctions now as sort of just the first step. We actually want more, and people are interested in true and total liberation of Palestine. People you talk to in the street, and this is a result of this break that happened, where people are now seeing that international law and the international rule-based world order, just that is just words, and it's not implemented. And they're seeing the chasm between, or they're feeling the chasm between the political elite and the actual people. So you have huge desire for action, you have huge drive and need for action by people that is completely and totally ignored by the political elite. Nothing can, symbolize this more than this recent petition about Eva Bush. You live in Stockholm, so I'm sure you know. And it's over 100,000 votes right now. Zero movement, zero mobility on this at all. The same thing when it comes to years of asking for the ending of the European Trade Agreement, and after that, an ICJ ruling of 2024 in July mandates, it makes it a legal obligation, not just a moral and ethical one, a legal obligation for third states not to render aid or assistance to the occupation. So it calls the occupation illegal. It has certain requirements for Israel, and then it has certain requirements for third states. One of them, of course, is not to recognize the occupation. The second is to not render aid or assistance in any way. I think it was Ghent University academics who reinterpreted this mandation by the ICJ ruling of 2024. I'm talking about the July one, not the January one. But they interpreted it that their academic institution has a mandatory obligation now to cut academic ties as well with academic institution. And the same applies, of course, to trade. The same applies first and foremost to weapons trade.
To what extent has institutions at all responded to the ICJ ruling?
In Sweden?
Yeah, in Sweden, how the feeling is more generally too. Has there been any movement in Sweden?
Not to my knowledge. There have been some, not institutional movement, to my knowledge. The only kind of instances or signals of some movement is some movement from the top a little bit about the European Trade Agreement, calling for freezing it. It specifically calls for freezing it only with respect to trade. And for some reason, all of the mentions that I've seen made by politicians and made by Maria, the foreign minister as well, intentionally specifies trade, sort of implying that they don't want to do Horizon, which is the research project, academic research project, or culture. But that is just one signal. It's still not actual actions and movement. We've seen some signals from some universities, but also very, very, very devoid of action, despite really clear calls by academics. So you have the Uppsala Declaration, for example, which has, I think, 1,400 votes so far plus. And it calls exactly
by academics.
By academics, yes, of course. It is just a declaration by academics. There is another one also that helped Germany to launch as well, by the way. By the way, this is, I don't know if you can hear it, but this is the big demo just coming across the office now.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it's very thematically appropriate.
Right, yeah, exactly. And actual institutional response to there's been quite the opposite. So you have universities like Lund, where the rector, for some reason or somehow, think it both suitable as an institution to say that we take our orders from the government. This is an academic university that is saying this. We take our orders from the government, and it's the government that needs to decide on this. And at the same time, saying that it was a mistake that academic institutions boycotted Russia, and it was even a mistake that academic institutions boycotted apartheid South Africa. This is his words. And this is the level of leadership within academic institutions, and it's absolutely shameful.
The only movement really that I've seen on an institutional level, I remember Gothenburg, the city of Gothenburg, tried to boycott some Israeli goods, but they were stopped in court. So it's like actively trying to hinder like any organic BDS actions, which I feel is crazy. And honestly, if you look at if you're talking about rhetoric and the words, many very, very extremely worried. They've been extremely worried now in the government for 2 years. And it's insane. And especially like you quoted an Israeli academic, and he's not unique. There are so many who just says this on a daily basis. Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around it, but here you can see the extreme distortion that happens from what actually happens in reality and what's being expressed in mass media, I guess. And it's very, very frustrating.
Yes, and to also kind of elaborate a little bit on the Gothenburg attempt, because this is one of the things that I actually would like to talk about with people, and I tried to do some outreach on it as well. Attempts that were made in Sweden so far for some sort of municipal boycott. There have been 2 attempts, one in Gothenburg and one in Malmö. There may have been more, I just haven't heard about them, or they were not advertised that well. Gothenburg one, let's start with the Malmö one. The Malmö one was calling for a boycott of all Israeli goods, specifically, or a boycott of Israel, actually, not Israeli goods. And it was just shut down. It was not even passed. It didn't even pass the municipal vote. And in Gothenburg, it was calling for a boycott of countries or states that are engaged in occupation of other states. So Russia, Israel. And it did manage to pass in the municipal level, and then the Liberal Party took it to court, and then it was defeated in court based on the argument that this is a foreign policy issue, while the municipality doesn't have the jurisdiction to determine a foreign policy issue. But one of the things that has been happening in Europe over the past 2 years is attempts by municipalities to do institutional municipal boycott of Israel, but also on a more principled manner and in a more sustainable manner. So what came out of this is a sort of a method of doing institutional boycotts with the municipality that is based on procurement law, European procurement law, and now Swedish procurement law. And we have a campaign here that was launched in Malmö recently by Malmö activists from different corners of the justice struggles and different corners of the movement, both the Palestinian movement, climate movement, and so on. This motion is following in the same footsteps, and it basically calls for excluding corporations or excluding from procurement that are involved in grave and serious violations of human rights, specifically war crimes, crimes against humanity, atrocity crimes, anywhere. So this motion would encompass any war crimes committed by corporations in Yemen, in Myanmar, Congo, in Palestine. So once a motion like this passes in the municipality, then the climate justice movement, for example, can come and they can put on the desk of the municipality, let's say of Stockholm, a research on Chevron or Ketelpera or any of those companies where they have committed or they have been involved in war crimes in a certain part of the world, and mandate that that municipality then doesn't have any contracts with that company. The same can be done by the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, where after a motion like this passes, we can come with research that has been done for 10 years, for example, on Caterpillar by the Presbyterian Church, saying or documenting their involvement in war crimes. I think even the UN just recognized this recently, that Caterpillar is involved in war crimes, and then kind of end that contract as well. And Malmo activists have done just that. They have just launched a recent motion and submitted it in the municipality for discussion, and they've managed to collect over 730 or something like this votes in about 1 month and a half of launching the motion, and in organizational endorsements as well as politicians and so on, all thinking that this is actually something that will make our city a more ethical and a more just city across the spectrum. So all over the world, there are companies that are abusing their power as huge multinational corporations and just committing war crimes everywhere without municipalities utilizing some power that they have in forcing and enforcing some sort of accountability for this. And this motion will enforce accountability in that regard as well.
That sounds very, very interesting. I want to follow that. I mean, honestly, what I find so interesting with BDS, it's. I mean, of course, it's rooted. It comes from Palestinian liberation, but the focus itself is way broader. And as you mentioned, it leads to these actions that are anti-racist, they are anti-war, and in essence, like from a common sense point of view, if you don't agree with this proposal, you're basically saying that, nah, we're okay with war crimes. And of course, like it's a question of being, it's convenient to allow your state allies, however that is expressed, to do whatever they want, because then we can be a part of their trade network, share infrastructure in different ways, and it's just horrendous. And in that sense, like if you are principled in this way, it's an uphill battle.
Yes, and that remark is the absolute truth. People are waking up, those who haven't over the past 70 years or more, those who are waking up now to the fact that the international law and um, ethical guidelines and ethical principles, they apply selectively and exclusively by the powerful. Now people are realizing this, and people are realizing that we're actually not going to be accepting Israel's behavior, and we're not going to rely on accepting our leaders' acceptance of Israel's behavior. Instead of what has been happening so far is that people sort of rely on the fact that they're being told that no, Israel hasn't done anything wrong, and that's it. Now they are more discerning, they are more um, following up or by themselves on what is happening. What you're saying about the BDS movement and how it's operating is one of the cornerstones of the BDS movement. So ever since it was launched, like I said before, there have been many, many attempts for mainstreaming boycott as a weapon. But one of the things that makes boycotts ineffective is the vast, huge amounts of companies that you are supposed to boycott if you are going to be a principled person and you're going to have the same rule and you're going to apply it to all um, uh, equally. And this is one of the things that since the BDS movement launched, it adopted a different line. It's basically trying to strike some golden balance between both being ethically principled and moral, but at the same time strategic effectiveness. And that golden balance comes from the strategic targeting that BDS does for selecting which campaigns to launch. For example, the BDS movement has I'm sure some people might know this, but it has a priority list, a priority targeting list, and a priority boycott list. And these are the lists that it calls on people to maintain a boycott of at all times and maintain pressure on at all times. And having a smaller list allows you to do two things. One, you're able to maintain the boycott for longer, and you're able to do the actual boycott. So if I have a list of 1,200 companies that I'm supposed to boycott, it's going to be very taxing on me, both economically and just mentally, to boycott it. But also it's going to be very hard to maintain that boycott for a long time. So that's the first advantage.
And if I just want to add to that a little bit, for a while, I tried to go vegan and I tried to do it very seriously. So I had to carry a little post-it with all of the E numbers that you can't eat if you want to go proper vegan. And then you need to cross-reference that with everything you need to buy. And that's hard work. And that's very, very tricky.
Yes.
Get that working. But then if you want to extend the analogy, let's say you're a group of students, you lobby the cafeteria to serve vegan food. Then you change the institution, and then it's much easier.
Yeah, that's true. And this is one of the campaigns that we also advocate for, apartheid-free zones. But we can get to that part later. The second advantage, though, for strategic boycotts is that you can customize your campaigns. And this is not a small advantage, especially when we're launching campaigns against big companies that can last years. So a campaign like Reebok, a campaign like AXA, a campaign like Puma. Reebok just started, but Puma and AXA, for example, these lasted years. Veolia, the same way. Customizing the campaigns and customizing how you pressure that company is very, very important. For a company like Aimpoint that was selling red dot eye sights in Malmö, selling it to an Israeli company that is then selling it to the Israeli military, that's a private dual-use item manufacturer or weapon manufacturer. They don't really care about their PR. They are not also so much consumer-facing. So you have to customize the way that you work on to pressure that company in a different way than you would a company like Puma, for example, which is a consumer-facing company that cares about its PR. So that sort of tactic of selecting targets strategically and then applying different types of pressure to them is a core concept in BDS, and it's a core concept of our own work as BDS.
That's I find super interesting. Sorry, I interrupted
No, no,
you.
no, go.
Because you say like those are categorically different. So one is more, let's say you're very customer facing, then having a huge awareness campaign. Uh, that's how I imagine the strategy goes. You can probably do it quite effective on social media in that sense, and that is very bad PR, and that might be a direct tied to decrease in sales. How would you describe that a campaign like that can look like?
It again, it would depend on the target. So, for example, sometimes we get locked into what a tactic called PR offensives, which is what most of us end up using for all of our campaigns, is that we just try to do bad PR for that company. But that doesn't work on all companies. So it wouldn't work on a company that is a weapons manufacturer, for example, that really doesn't care about its PR, or a bank that is notoriously anti-PR, just doesn't care. It invests in fossil fuels, it invests in, or a private fund, and privately owned weapons companies or dual use manufacturers like Aimpoint. Of course, it makes sense that they don't care that much. Of course, you can get them to care a little bit with clever tactics, but might not be the same care that they would put if they are vilified and scandalized as, let's say, a cultural institution or a theater. If a theater is bringing in an Israeli company to do a show on its premises, that theater cares a lot about its PR. So you can do PR offensives on it quite successfully. But there are other ways of pressure, like tactics are many. So you have delays, this is a pressure tactic. You have withdrawing support, this is a pressure tactic. You have official channels, also again, courts, lobbying, litigation. Those are all official channels that you can use. One of the things that people are still trying to do against Aimpoint, because again, holding companies accountable for the things that they are doing or did, because Aimpoint announced that they have stopped, but this is still something that we're calling for people to do, is to hold Aimpoint accountable, is holding them accountable in court and holding them accountable by changing their classification from a hunting equipment to a dual use item. Or something that is governed by military.
Which it obviously is.
Which obviously it is. So it should have been done a long time ago, and have been calls for it for a long time ago, but the calls never moved except with public pressure. And this is one of the things that we try to also advocate for and focus on, is building our people power. Palestinians, like every justice struggle in the world, they know that yes, international law on our side, the moral high ground on our side, ethics on our side are good and important, and that's the basis, like a principle of our movement, but it's not enough. The oppressed, they don't win with having the moral high ground, they win with power. And that power, we don't have, political elite power, but we can have people power, we can have strategic litigation power, we can have media power, we can have cultural power, and so on. Effective solidarity power also. This is one important thing. So our solidarity is not symbolic, is not just performative, it's effective and it's direct. This is the power that we're trying to build. And in selecting the campaigns, this also becomes a factor. So the criteria the BDS movement has for selecting a campaign are 4. They have been the same since BDS launched. And they, of course, are quite flexible, but it's 4 areas or 4 categories that the BDS movement judges on whether or not to launch a campaign. The first is the most straightforward, which is the level of complicity. So if you have 2 companies and one of them has a deeper level of complicity, let's say one of them just has stores in Israel and the other one actually has factories in illegal settlements, that's a deeper level of complicity. So that's the first factor. The second factor is media appeal or brand awareness. So if you have 2 companies, one of them, and both of them have the same level of complicity, but one of them is a huge brand and the other one is a very small unknown brand, then it might be feasible to go for the bigger brand, so that within your campaign, you're also educating and raising awareness a lot more about your cause. and managing to get more people involved in your cause as well. The
Effective
third,
communication.
exactly. So it's going to be much, much more effective to campaign against Coca-Cola than it is against some sort of, I don't know, small time northern Sweden manufacturer or something like this for soda. That also is something that we encourage people to do to localize the struggle.
I would be so disappointed if Nygårda or someone like that who makes Julmust would be involved here. I would be so sad. So
Let's hope not. If any of the listeners actually have information about this, it would be appreciated. And then you have the third criteria, which is intersectionality. So if a company has the same media appeal as the other one and has the same level of complicity as the other one, but that company is oppressing or participating in the oppression of Palestinians and Sudanese and the people of Yemen and so on, different struggles, and maybe the climate as well, then that becomes a much better target than a company that is just involved in one type of oppression, because it allows you to build more people power. It allows you to expand the solidarity movement. And the fourth criteria, which is one of the most important and uh, often forgotten, to be honest, is winnability, the chances of success. Is this, they are extremely deeply complicit. They're complicit in murder. There is no question about it. But they are also conglomerates that is extremely hard to boycott. But it is possible to pressure. It is possible to target. It is possible to pressure from within. For example, like the Asia, No Asia for Apartheid campaign from Microsoft people and No Tech for
and just to
Apartheid from,
elaborate there, Azure is a cloud computing platform that
right. Yeah.
houses a lot of IT infrastructure. I've worked with it before, and it's a huge part of what makes our society run.
Yes.
So, as you said, like this is deeply integrated in society and it's very hard to move. But at
Yes.
the same time, if you are able to make a difference there, that's very, very big at the same time.
Yes. And it's unrealistic to call for a boycott of it, but it's not unrealistic to call for a pressure on it. And that's the difference that you sometimes try to advocate for us. But this, like, just wrapping this up to the earlier point that you made about BDS, this is the entire philosophy. We don't want just performative sorts of surface level support. We want actual effective and meaningful support. It's been 700 and some days now of genocide, and the main call of Palestinians is not charity. They're not asking for charity. What they're demanding is meaningful and impactful solidarity. Solidarity that is rooted in action, uh, that is about active allyship, not performative allyship. The core message of BDS: all complicity, state, institutional, corporate complicity in Israel's regime and system of oppression, apartheid, and now genocide. And this is the most effective form of solidarity.
I want to talk a little bit about getting the resources to be able to execute a campaign or keep a movement like this going, because it takes a lot of work. I'm thinking, tying it to a little bit, when I look around in my circles and go to demonstrations, I see a lot of new organizations popping up on the true grassroots. We need to actually organize and get something done together. They're popping up everywhere. Now it's a lot of work to try and to coordinate these in between. And it's always an ongoing question about what resources do we have? How do we use these effectively? And then I can imagine that's since BDS is a global movement, maybe we can dig into that a little bit later, how it works on the global and the local level. Resource-wise, is it volunteer work and then you leverage the expertise that exists within the movement? How do you think about that strategically?
What the BDS movement globally does is that it has developed this massive network of volunteer BDS activists, both within their own spheres of influence, so culture, academia, sports, and so on, and also dedicated sort of volunteer activists that are trying to organize for BDS in general within their own society. As um, a structure for itself as well, the BDS, Global BDS Movement. There is the BDS National Committee, which is called the BNC, that oversees and runs the Global BDS Movement. But it's a very decentralized movement. As us in BDS Sverige, for example, there is no like office in Ramallah that is telling us, hey, you work on this campaign. It is quite literally up to every single individual to be his own BDS if they want, as long as they just accept the BDS guidelines. But that's not, of course, a good way to organize. So you can have 100 BDSs in one country, one for each city, and you can have just one BDS in that country that's trying to organize a lot of BDS work and a lot of BDS efforts. As for our own organizing, we're all volunteers. Actually, most of us either are full-time students or full-time workers. I am employed, for example, and we just do BDS advocacy and BDS organizing within the free time that we have. So managing capacity is a huge issue, and it is one of the issues that makes us very very hyper focused in our own organization on not wasting time and not wasting effort. So choosing very carefully which campaigns we contribute to, which campaigns we put effort into, and so on. We
But
try
I
to
think
put,
that's a good point to hammer home because the same goes for me. I'm not really getting compensated to try to
yeah,
create a credible political alternative here in Sweden. We've chosen to have a part-time job, unpaid part-time job, like maybe 20 hours a week, or it varies. It's extremely rewarding, but it's also sometimes really, really hard. But I feel like it's just such a clear example that we're doing this out of principle.
yes, and there is honestly no other way to do it. There will never be resources enough for combating the massive resources that they put into maintaining their system of oppression. So it will always have to be people actually getting together and putting a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, just focusing on having a good, let's say, campaign in their town or a good message or a good awareness session and so on. And collectively, we build this power together.
So um, it can be quite daunting from an outsider's perspective. And I'm talking a little bit from personal experience. Okay, I now feel very strongly that something is truly wrong about how the world has reacted to the genocide and how things are playing out in Sweden. And I want to actually become active and do something about it. How would you think about taking a step like that emotionally to lower like the threshold? Because jumping immediately into it and taking a direct action on um, uh, for instance, doing like Palestine action in the UK, and then be branded as a terrorist organization on extremely dubious grounds, or like it's completely illegitimate. Would you say that you can gradually increase your involvement?
For somebody who's completely new to this struggle, take your time to get to know the different political actors, let's say, or the different organizations and organizers within the movement. Um, take a bit of time, don't take too much time. But at the same time, start small, start with doing something. Even if you feel extremely powerless and extremely weak, whatever you can contribute with is to affect anything. It is, I mean, you have a saying here in Sweden about many drops make a stream or something like that.
Många
This is what
bäckar små.
Yes, exactly. This is exactly what organizing is. Organizing is doing the small, tiny tasks that are extremely boring, extremely repetitive, extremely dull, that collectively turn into something incredible. So, for example, the Montgomery bus boycott, when it happened. So the decision to do the Montgomery bus boycott was taken on a day, and then through the night, through like 10 or 11 hours during the night, people had to actually let others know about the boycott. So they had to write flyers and they had to print flyers. And back then, the printing was not like I can go into the office and print like 1,000 copies now. No, it had to be like this manual machines of stenographers, somebody writing it, somebody printing it and copying it, and so on. And without the ladies that did this, and the book that I read this in mentioned that this was mostly ladies who were organizing this. Without them doing this, there would have been no Montgomery bus boycott the following day. And it's exactly the same. Even, for example, here in Sweden in 1961, this is one of my favorite stories that I read about the anti-apartheid struggle in Sweden, or the solidarity movement with the anti-apartheid struggle. In 1961, you had a high school in Sundsvall that decided they're going to collect 1 krona a month from each student. The students themselves decided this, to get a South African student who was expelled from their university to come study in Sweden. And they managed to collect the equivalent of 250,000. They managed to collect 14,000 kronas, and in today's money, it sounds like 250,000 kronas. And they managed to get a South African student to study in Sweden for 3 years. Not only that, other schools around them and the areas around them also copied them and they started doing the same. And then the Sundsvall High School students also decided to one up themselves and their neighbors as well. And they passed the motion in their high school canteen to boycott South African oranges. So these are 16, 15, 17-year-olds that are refusing to eat South African oranges to support the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. So look at how minuscule that action is in 1961 and compare it with the massive waves of support that Sweden had for the anti-apartheid struggle in Southern Africa in general. You had in 1963 the youth movement issuing a call for a municipal boycott. And you had between 1963 in May and March 1965, 20 out of 24 regional municipalities had passed boycott, and so on and so forth. You can always see these things developing and these things moving as well. As daunting as it is to see a huge movement that you may not understand fully how it works yet, take it as a mission to be as effect just waking up one day with an epiphany that injustice and oppression is wrong. Justice comes because ordinary people like us, they realize or start to look at ourselves as potential agents of social change, and that we collectively have the power in our hands to create the new world that we want to live in. Bit by bit, we will be doing this. And in the BDS movement, or in BDS Sverige as well, we are currently calling for 5 points of priority to work on. So the first is escalating and peacefully disrupting business as usual relations with complicit corporations, states, and institutions. And the second, escalating strategic boycotts and divestments from corporations that are complicit in Israel's regime of apartheid, oppression, and now genocide, including banks, of course, a bank like DNB or a bank like SEB, or even our pension funds, for example, right now, pension fund number 7, it invests over 4.5 billion krona. 3.9 of them is in a company called Palantir. And we all know how Palantir is contributing to the actual genocide of Palestinians, let alone the maintenance of the apartheid regime.
Just to pause there, because I'm not sure that many people are familiar with Palantir. The founder is called Peter Thiel. He's one of, cut from the same cloth as Elon Musk, I would say, to summarize a little bit. But I guess a little bit more clandestine and clever. Yeah, Palantir is pretty bad.
Yes, and even I saw a video of him recently where he was talking about how he's so passionate about the Antichrist, and he talked for hours about it. So this is somebody who's contributing to genocide, contributing to apartheid, manufacturing surveillance and data processing equipment and tools to contribute to the oppression of Palestine. And also his pet hobby project is Antichrist.
I just want to draw the contrast here. Here we have some of the most powerful people in the world controlling the most powerful corporations that are actively building surveillance apparatus that can be used on all of us, and then has an obsession with the Antichrist. And here you and I are sitting, have a conversation about this, trying to be honest readers of history and actually learning and put that into practice. I would see that this is in general what I experience when I lift my gaze and actually realize what people in power are like. And then we look at the people that are trying to work on these grassroots movements. Just so pay attention to this, because that's how I experience it most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the same cloth that Eva Bush comes from saying that Israel is doing the world a favor, I believe that is the same cloth where the rector of Lund University coming from saying that no, we shouldn't have actually contributed to ending apartheid in South Africa, and we shouldn't have boycotted South African University. Again, AP Fund number 7, as well as AP Fund number 3, and I think others as well have investments. I think it was AP Fund number 3. I don't want to be saying something incorrect, but one of them was investing in a company that manufactures white phosphorus, an Israeli company that manufactures white phosphorus. I don't remember if it would be AP Fund number 3 or another AP Fund, but you will see it in the news. It was a couple of weeks ago. These are companies that we call on escalating strategic actions and campaigns against them. So this was point number 2. Number 3, saying businesses, social places, cultural places, academic places, even unions, to declare themselves an apartheid-free zone. And you can go to our website and look at our apartheid-free zone examples and explanation what the campaign is. But for example, we have so far over 50 apartheid-free zones over the past year that signed up. You can see them on the map on our website as well, between cultural spaces, businesses, restaurants, cafes, local spaces, bookshop, a farm or multiple farms, and so on. Number 4 is organizing and launching campaigns for what we call an ethical procurement and an ethical investment policy. And those policies basically exclude any company or institution from procurement and from investment if that company is involved in grave and serious violations of human rights, war crimes, crimes against humanity, atrocity crimes, anywhere. So it's not limited to Palestine, but it includes involvement in war crimes in Palestine. And scandalizing and exposing any politicians and influentials who are against having an ethical procurement and an ethical investment policy in our cities. This is the bare minimum that we can do, just like we have procurement policies against investment in fossil fuels. We should have we should adopt our role as instigators of a more ethical and a more just society more seriously, and adopt ethical procurement policies as well. Like I said, Malmo has a campaign ongoing right now, and other cities should follow suit with similar campaigns. And number 5 is to pressure the government and continue to pressure the government to end its shameful complicity with first of all, the occupation, the apartheid, and now the genocide in Israel, by ending its arms. And I've seen the foreign minister before say, oh, we don't export weapons, but we do import weapons. And we do import weapon systems. We have a contract with Elbit Systems for 1.7 billion kroners. And we have a contract with UVision for the Hero drone system. We have a contract for Elbit system on the parliament building as well. And Saab also imports equipment from Rafael for its manufacturing, and so on and so forth. The details can also be found on the website, but only some of them. There's more and more
Just
details.
Want to clarify a little bit there. Elbit Systems, they have a an office here in Sweden. I think it's very reasonable to say that the work that's being done here in Sweden by the company Elbit Systems, who is part of the wider defense contract, it is actively contributing. I think that's more than fair to say. Maybe we don't export any direct munitions to Israel, but we're actively assisting in the development of weapon system that is being used.
Yes. And we are not only with Elbit, which supplies 80% of the occupation forces drones, but we also actively contribute through other companies like Volvo Group, for example, which has it has a stake in a company called Merkavim, which manufactures armored buses for settlers, and it has its own bulldozers are being used to bulldoze and demolish Palestinian homes. So this is a company that is actively contributing to the oppression of Palestinians, and it's a Swedish company. I'm not talking about Volvo Cars, which is the Chinese-owned Volvo. This is Volvo Group. This is, at the end of the day, these companies benefit from our money. These companies are Swedish companies. So we should not allow this, and we should not accept this, and we should build campaigns to pressure our government as well to end its own complicity, and to implement a full two-way military embargo as well on Israel that includes import, export, and transitioning of weapons. This is not a matter of charity. This is a matter of duty. This is a matter of legal obligation. It's not up to the discretion of the Swedish government. This is its duty. And finally, number 6, this is something that we call for as well, to support and help human rights and legal groups' efforts to investigate and to prosecute Israelis who have committed war crimes against Palestinians and have contributed to the genocide in Gaza as well, like we see with the Hind Raja Foundation. This needs to be done in Sweden as both on an institutional level and also on civil society level as well. So these are just examples of what people can do. Some of it have to do with our own personal, individual contributions through boycotts, through helping campaigns, sharing them, participating in them. And some of them have to do with bigger goals like launching new campaigns or investigating or supporting other efforts. But the base idea is that the accountability that is missing from the world right now and the total impunity that Israel is enjoying in the world right now, this will not change without us enforcing the accountability. And to enforce the accountability, we need relentless efforts and consistent efforts as well to apply it and to enforce it.
And I think it's important to make it very clear that I think in the court of public opinion, Israel has lost. It's devastated and it has no support at all, I would say, very, very little. But when, as you say, when it comes to holding them accountable, it comes with actually the institutions that we have that govern us actually holds them accountable. As you said, if individuals commit crimes, they should be held accountable for them. That's basically what we're asking for, both BDS and also us in Meta 25. We want us to respect, all of us to have to respect the law.
Yes, 100%. And it's also kind of very interesting to sometimes watch Israeli news, where there was a show just maybe a week ago or something, a talk show, where one of the panelists was saying Israel's standing in the world and people, the way they look at Israelis is that as if we are Russia. Like they're isolating us as if we are Russia. And he was so incredulous about it that this is an extreme thing for him. But even the head of the Israeli Trade Association has said it before. BDS and boycotts have changed Israel's economic landscape. And this will continue and this will not become less. Just today or yesterday, You had the head of a theater association in the Netherlands. Her name is Caroline something, that announced a cultural boycott of Israel. This has been quite a taboo subject for a while. And you have teams also calling for, even in Eurovision, for example, you have countries that are now conditioning their participation in Eurovision. Only one country so far, but
But
bravery is lacking.
finally,
Yes, yes, finally. It took 2 years of genocide, but you have 12 countries in the Hague Group's Bogota conference that are committing to a one-way military embargo. In 2023, October 6th, you had 0 countries calling for a military embargo on Israel. Today, you have 54 countries calling for a military embargo on Israel, and you have 1 country that is European that is committing to a full military embargo of Israel, and you have 12 countries, the ones in Bogota, that are committing to a one-way military embargo of Israel. These are all signs of the changing of the tide when it comes to isolating Israel diplomatically, culturally, materially, militarily, in all areas. Israel must be held accountable for its crimes.
and all of this requires a lot of endurance. As you say, like this takes years, this takes decades, and it's ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. How do you structure your engagement so it is sustainable? Because I have frequently seen people that they get super motivated. They want to do so many things. They spend 4 weeks going 200%, but they're not able to make this sustainable and do this in the long term. So have you had any struggles with this?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, but the majority comes with just experience. So, just being in the movement and being in other movements as well, kind of allows you to temper yourself a little, and also to um, kind of judge the length of involvement pretty early on. Think that this campaign, for example, that we're about to engage on, is going to take a year, and you prepare yourself mentally for this. But in the vast majority of the time, you're compelled and you're propelled by your own sense of duty. That Palestinians, over more than 7 decades, have been enduring and resisting colonial violence and erasure. And now the people of Gaza have been defying a genocide for 2 years. Then you feel that we, the people outside of this occupation, the people outside of this concentration camp, we must reject the indignity of silence and the indignity of inaction. And we must also refuse to temper or lower our expectations or our aspirations as well. So we must always keep in mind that this is, however long it's going to take, but this is a liberation struggle that will succeed. And the Palestinian cause will be a victorious one.
And I would also like to add that this, as I see it at least in many ways, is democracy in action. This is working together, using our speech, our ability to organize, to try and affect change. And this is a little bit how I went about doing it, because I decided, okay, if I truly believe in democracy and want to express that seriously, okay, I need to dedicate a portion of my life, a portion of my time to do this. Maybe it's a little bit of a banal analogy, but you never finish working out. You need to take care of your body your entire life, and you simply just do it. And at the same time, okay, now I'm gonna actually ensure that I live by my values, as we talked about now, not as necessarily I'm not gonna eat this specific type of olives because they are grown on occupied territory, but actually participating in the community that is trying to pressure the institutions. And I must say, one of my mentors, Michael J. Brooks, he said on multiple occasions, be kind to people, but ruthless with institutions. And that's something that I at times have playing in my head.
It's perfect. I
So
will
I'm
adopt
think,
this.
yeah, I miss him. Miss him a lot. But yeah, to summarize, us in Sweden, we must be held accountable or hold our institutions accountable because we are complicit and we should not, we need to be aware of it and not think that we are sitting on the sidelines. Very important, I think, to realize this. And also, becoming active shouldn't necessarily be that scary. It's, in a way, seek the contact to begin with. I find that helpful. Just meet someone, have a face, and in that way you have an in. Or as you expressed, or maybe you're existing in you are in an existing community. Let's say a class of high schoolers that then suddenly like, no, we're not going to eat oranges. This is our statement. That's also really, really cool.
Yes, and you can always decide, let's say you are, this is, for example, consider this a message to somebody who is new. If you are new to the struggle or if you are new to BDS, then look at BDS campaigns that are ongoing and think, okay, can I support one of them in more than just sharing? So let's say that the basic level of participation is just amplifying and sharing the message and committing to the actual boycott. So besides that basic level, what else can I do? Can I maybe find if there are people starting a campaign on this target in my community and join them? Or if there isn't, maybe I and a couple of my colleagues or friends or comrades can start a campaign again. So, for example, Reebok just announced that they're going to sponsor the Israeli national team. So BDS is calling for a boycott of Reebok now. There are no people working on a campaign to boycott Reebok and to do actions, maybe at Reebok store, or to educate people about Reebok's complicity, or to maybe go to sports events that Reebok sponsors and call for ending the sponsorship and so on, just working the campaign work against Reebok. If there aren't people in Sweden doing this, or if there aren't people in, Dalarna or the, Örebro that are doing this, you can be. So you take the mantle of actually launching a campaign for BDS or joining an existing one. Or even besides that, let's say you are actually part of a clique or a circle that doesn't know anything about BDS. Educate them about BDS or advocate for BDS within that circle. Let's say you are a theater actor or a film actor, participate by signing the pledges, by signing the BDS endorsements, by calling for a cultural boycott. Uh, does your institution have the capacity to actually become an apartheid-free zone? This is something that you can do, that your theater becomes an apartheid-free zone. We have 2 theaters in Malmo, for example, that declared themselves an apartheid-free zone. One cinema that maybe is thinking about it, and so on and so forth. These are all things.
How do you become an apartheid-free zone? Do you need to send in an application to the Central Committee of BDS worldwide, and then you get a stamp, or how does it work?
See, you can always declare yourself an apartheid-free zone just based on the announced apartheid-free zone campaign criteria, which let's go through them. So what an apartheid-free zone is, it's a space that is free of support for oppression, apartheid, and specifically occupation of Palestine. And it is a space that commits to the boycott of the BDS priority list. So let's say you are a restaurant, then you would commit to boycotting Coca-Cola because it is on the BDS priority list. And if you are maybe a restaurant that has a printer, then you commit to boycotting HP because it is on the BDS priority list. And so that's the second. So the first is announcing you're becoming an apartheid-free zone. The second is boycotting, and the third is considering your apartheid-free zone journey that you continuously try to advocate for Palestinian rights, to be a space that is actually free of apartheid, to be a space that is contributing to a more just society in all sections of society. All of this does not require you to submit anything to some sort of central committee, but we do ask you to do. We just ask you so that we can send you a sticker that we have developed for declaring yourself an apartheid-free zone, and also to make sure that you are actually introduced to the campaign process. So we have made it an easy thing, an easy form that you can fill on the website. There are activists that are working on the campaign in Gothenburg, in Helsingborg, in Malmo, in Stockholm. They can come and talk to you if you'd like. They can have an online call with you if you'd like. They can just have an email exchange with you, and then they mail you the sticker, or they go with you and then you make the declaration. They can also support you with model declarations for specific types of spaces, like a cultural space or an academic space and so on. And any space can become an apartheid-free zone. We've seen schools become apartheid-free zones, not in Sweden, but in other places. We've seen unions, we've seen cities declare themselves an apartheid-free zone. Every space can become one. Like I said, send us a mail through the form if you are willing to become one, or if you know one you would like to recommend and you know the owner and so on. Please feel free to do so.
Just personally, I feel like having that sticker or having made that announcement and making it clear, I see it as a badge of honor. I see it as a more like being svanmärkt. That's something like, yeah, this is actually really good. It's a Swedish, if you fulfill certain environmental criteria, then you can have a badge.
Oh, right. That is a good way to put it.
It's like, okay, yeah, now I can actively make an informed decision that I want to be at this establishment.
Yes. And you would know that your money is at least not going to any of those complicit companies.
So I don't know how the sticker looks like, but I'll try and post that or edit this into this video so it becomes very clear how it looks like, because I think that's important to see the symbol.
Yes, I think there were 2 in Stockholm that just became apartheid-free zones last week, so you will see the videos on social media, on our social media and others.
So I would like to say thank you very, very much. This has been a very interesting conversation.
Thank you. This has been a very interesting one for me too.
Ah, wonderful. Before we go, are there any things you'd like to plug? Your website, social media?
I can maybe plug the Red Visa Malmo campaign a little bit more. This is the pin. It's not that clear, but I can maybe send you a copy of the flyer and you can maybe put it on the screen or something like that. If you are in Malmo, please go in and vote for this campaign. We would like to get as many people aware of this. It has actually been our experience that there hasn't been many instances at all. Like, it's a very small percentage of people who we talk to about the campaign and they don't end up endorsing it. Organizations and individuals, and it's often the problem of just reaching people with the messaging than it is to convince them of something, because to a lot of people, this is such a basic thing that they support, and not supporting war crimes. Learn about Red Visa Malmo, the campaign, and please support it if you live in Malmo or work in Malmo, of course. And the Apartheid-Free Zones campaign as well could always use people to seek places or talk to places. And we do workshops continuously as well. So please send us a message if you're interested in working on Apartheid-Free Zones, and excuse us if we take some time to reply. All volunteers, and most of the people who actually work on the Apartheid-Free Zones campaign are full-time workers too. So it takes a bit of time to get through the emails, but we reply to everyone. And
the email is
apartheidfreezones@bdsveria.com, or just info@bdsveria.com, or you can use the form on the websites. There's contact us form. Thank you so much, Mark, for such a wonderful conversation.
Fantastic. I hope that we continue the work, continue the struggle, and we'll have a talk again, and hopefully things have improved.
Yes, thank you so much, and good luck with the podcast too.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.